When most people hear the word Envoy, they picture a man in a suit stepping out of a black car, not a destroyer sliding through gray seas with its radar glowing in the dark. But in the real world, diplomacy doesn't just happen in conference rooms. It happens in the air and on the water. On one side, there's the political story everyone sees. A new envoy linked to Donald Trump flying into Europe, selling a controversial peace plan for Ukraine. On the other side, there's the message no one votes on. Russian ships and jets moving just a little closer to NATO lines than they did the week before. This is what it looks like when diplomacy gets tested by steel. Our story begins not with a ship, but with a plane. A private jet touches down at a European airport. Cameras snap. Commentators rush to social media. The man stepping onto the tarmac is not a career diplomat. He's a developer, a businessman close to Trump, suddenly cast as a peace broker in one of the most brutal wars on the planet. To some, he's a fresh voice. To others, he's a walking provocation. His back-channel plan talks about ceasefires, territorial concessions, security guarantees, phrases that sound good in television interviews but feel like landmines in Kyiv and Moscow. In Kyiv, leaders worry it's a trap that forces them to accept losing land in exchange for promises that can be broken. In Moscow, hardliners see it as weakness, proof the West is getting tired and looking for a deal. On the surface, it's politics. Behind the scenes, it's fuel. Because every time someone whispers the words peace plan, there's another voice asking, what if we just push a little harder right now? Cut to the sea. While a would-be peacemaker checks into his hotel, a NATO task group is already underway in cold, choppy waters. An American destroyer, a European frigate, and a logistics ship form a tight formation, their wakes carving white scars into the slate-colored ocean. Officially, it's a routine patrol. Unofficially, it's a line drawn in motion. The crew on the U.S. destroyer knows the headlines. They've seen the video clips of the envoy giving interviews, heard the pundits calling his plan naive, bold, dangerous, sometimes all three in the same sentence. What they also know is this: whenever politicians start talking loudly about peace, someone, somewhere, decides it's the perfect moment to test how much pain the other side is still willing to risk. On the bridge, under dim red lights, the officer of the watch stares at the radar display. So far it's clean. Merchant traffic, weather echoes, nothing special. Then just after midnight, new blips appear near the edge of the screen. Fast, low, coming from the direction of Russian-held territory. The air defense officer leans forward. New tracks, 2 fighters, possible Su-27s or Su-30. Range 70 miles, closing. No alarms ring in the ship, no one panics. This isn't the first time Russian jets have come out to say hello, but the timing is interesting. On the same day the envoy's plane lands, Russian aircraft launch a patrol that lines up almost perfectly with the NATO formation's course. Not a coincidence. Not out here. On shore, someone in a Russian operations room has made a decision. Peace envoy or not, we're going to show them what we think of their red lines. The fighters continue inbound. 50 miles, 40, 30. At 30 miles, the destroyer's long-range radar has their pattern nailed down. The jets are not just passing by on some innocent route. They're pushing toward the NATO ships like a pair of fast, impatient wolves. The operations officer glances at the captain. Your call, sir. The captain has been here before. Every encounter like this runs through his head like a checklist. Don't overreact, don't underreact. Above all, don't give anyone an excuse to say you started it. He nods once. We'll let them show us how stupid they want to be tonight. The bridge crew lets out a breath that might be a laugh if they weren't so focused. The destroyer holds its course. Down in the Combat Information Center, the atmosphere is different. It's darker, quieter, a room full of glowing screens and quiet voices reading out ranges and bearings. The NATO frigate reports the same contacts. The logistics ship stays tucked in close, protected by the 2 warships like a convoy in miniature. 20 miles. The Russian pilots know exactly how far they are from the ships. They've done this before. They've practiced it. They have standing guidance. Be aggressive, show presence. But don't do anything so insane that it triggers a war we're not ready for. The trouble is, every pilot and every crew has a different idea of where that line is. 10 miles, one of the jets splits off, dropping lower. The other climbs slightly, maybe to film, maybe to act as a decoy. On the destroyer, cameras track both. Sensors lock on, not to fire, but to watch. The ship's missiles sleep in their vertical launch cells, but the software that controls them is wide awake, calculating trajectories nobody wants to use. The radio stays quiet. It's an old game. Pretend nothing is happening until something almost does. Then the low jet roars in. It comes in below the cloud deck, skimming above the water, nose pointed not at the ship but just offset, like a boxer's fist grazing your cheek without quite landing. A near miss that still leaves you stunned. Every sailor who's never seen a Russian fighter up close learns in 1 second just how loud one is. The aircraft knifes past the destroyer's bow, maybe a few hundred feet away, maybe less. On deck, the wind blast rips at clothing and gear. On the bridge, someone swears under their breath. In the CIC, someone marks the exact time and range with a calm voice that doesn't match the adrenaline in the room. The Russian pilot pulls up slightly, banks hard, and circles back, this time aiming to pass between the American and the European frigate. Now it's no longer just about intimidation, it's about humiliation. The unspoken message, your precious NATO unity, is just a line we can fly straight through. The captain has had enough. He doesn't order missiles armed, he doesn't change course dramatically, he doesn't shout into the radio. Instead, he reaches for a power that doesn't make headlines, but keeps generals awake at night. The power to redraw an invisible line. He speaks quietly. Tayo, bring up red line protocol. We're done letting them choose the distance. A few decks below, the tactical action officer acknowledges. Red line protocol? Aye. In simple terms, red line protocol is this. You set a specific distance and altitude as unsafe. Go inside that box, and we respond every time the same way, with the same words on the same recorded channels. No more improvisation, no more guessing, no more hoping someone doesn't take a joke too far. The ship's systems adjust. The crew is notified. A quick briefing speeds through the internal net. This is the line. This is the response. As the Russian jet swings around for its next pass, the United States destroyer is no longer just a target of harassment. It's a lighthouse with a clear beam. When the fighter crosses the invisible boundary, the response is instant. The radio crackles. Russian aircraft, this is United States Navy warship. Your approach is unsafe and unprofessional. You are operating within a danger zone. Alter course immediately. But this time, the message doesn't just go out on a standard international frequency, it goes out on multiple channels. It's logged, time-stamped, and forwarded, live to NATO command. In other words, even if Russian media never mentions this encounter, the official record will show exactly who crossed what line and when. The fighter hesitates for a fraction of a second. The pilot hears the tone of the call, the precision of the language, and, more importantly, the subtext. We are not improvising anymore. We're executing a plan. He pulls up earlier than last time. The pass is still aggressive, but it's not as close. On the Russian ship that's been loosely shadowing the NATO group, their captain gets the report. The Americans have drawn a clear box and called their approach unsafe on recorded channels. He knows what that means. If he pushes any closer with his own ship now, and something goes wrong, Moscow can't convincingly say, "We had no idea anything was wrong." The record will show warnings, distances, times. Escalation suddenly looks less like boldness and more like stupidity. He orders his helmsman to hold course and speed. Back in the city where the Envoy is staying, journalists are arguing on live TV about whether his plan is serious or a sideshow. Is he freelancing? Is he testing the waters for a future Trump administration? Is he helping or undermining official US policy? Viewers argue in the comments. Hashtags trend. Everyone has an opinion. Almost no one knows that. At the same hour those debates were happening, a different question was being answered at sea. Will NATO allow Russia to move the red lines? Or will it quietly move them back? On the destroyer, the captain orders a small course adjustment. Not away from the Russians, not in surrender, but deeper along the planned route. A route drawn specifically to make one point unmistakable. We're still here. We're still operating. Your noise hasn't changed the mission. He also authorizes something else. Bring the Allied frigate into closer formation. We're going to make this picture crystal clear. Within an hour, the American destroyer and the European frigate tighten up, their distance shrinking. To a satellite overhead, the formation now looks like a single unified block, not scattered targets. To any Russian analyst watching, the message is obvious. Unity isn't a press release. It's measured in meters between hulls. The Russian jets make a few more passes, each one a little higher, a little farther out. The pilots have gotten the message. Push too hard now, and they're not just poking a ship. They're poking a documented, announced red line. Eventually, the fighters turn away, heading back toward their base. The radar screen begins to clear. The Russian shadowing ship maintains a respectful distance, enough to show presence, not enough to risk an accident. The small theater of intimidation has been shut down, not with shots, but with procedure and discipline. On the destroyer, one of the younger sailors finally exhales. So that's it? They just leave? The senior chief next to him shakes his head. That's never it. We just won today's round. He's right, because what really changed tonight wasn't just the distance of a flyby or the course of a ship. It was something more important: expectations. Russia came out expecting a NATO formation, wrapped up in political confusion, an American ship whose leaders would be distracted by arguments over envoys and peace plans, or afraid of being accused of escalating anything. Instead, they found a destroyer that had its procedures sharpened, its boundaries defined, its network plugged in. While commentators on cable news were asking, is the West losing its nerve? The West's nerve was being quietly hardened by sailors who never appear on TV. By morning, the task group reports the encounter up the chain. There will be slides, maps, and bullet points, ranges, headings, radio transcripts. NATO officers will use this night as a case study. Here's how they tried to push. Here's where we drew the line. Here's how they reacted. Politicians will keep arguing about envoys and negotiations. Some will cheer any talk of peace, others will call it surrender. Strategies will be drafted, leaked, criticized. But out at sea, the game remains the same. Every time someone tests the line, someone else has to decide whether to blink, push back, or rewrite the rules. Tonight, as the destroyer's wake stretches behind it like a long white scar on dark water, one thing is clear. Trump's envoy may be trying to redraw the map with words. Russia may be trying to redraw it with pressure. But there is another pen in this story. The gray hull of a ship, the steady course of a formation, and a red line that now runs clearly and quietly across the water. As long as that line holds, there's a limit to how far anyone's test can go. And that, more than any speech or press release, is what Moscow did not expect.